Okay, so now we are heading into week 5, and this is we're going to talk about a new exercise, pull-offs, which is sort of the opposite of hammer-ons or descending slurs, if you want to talk about it in classical format. And we're going to talk about the 12-bar blues, which is something that is fantastically common chord progression that is used throughout the world. And it is incredibly important in black music and incredibly important in history of American music, in my view. Jazz uses it. It's just an incredibly popular form of music throughout the world. So the blues progression, there are very many variations on this, and I will actually link an academic article if you have access to Spectrum or want to go down a rabbit hole with this. There's plenty of people who talk about blues in a scholarship context with some big heavy-hitting academics that have studied it. But for our purposes, I'm just going to give you the most basic blues, the most common blues, and hopefully you can get acclimated to it with that, and then you kind of have a basis for listening to anything else. Also, we're going to work, there are a million rock blues tunes. We're going to talk about Crossroads. That's just one of many. I encourage you to just Google blues artists because it's a really cool tradition. But I think that's a great tune to talk about because it's very straightforward, has a very formulaic kind of blues progression. So blues progressions, a lot of times when you're playing blues, you're going to use those power chords that we just talked about in the last week. You can also use bar chords. You can use open chords too. But the pattern of blues progressions, and this will be written out for you too, the pattern of blues progressions is a really one you've probably heard before, and I would encourage you to try to use your ears. I'm going to play through the whole blues progression right now, just using power chords, and I would encourage you to look up 12-bar blues in A, or use this and just try to hear it as opposed to looking at the chart. This is an oral tradition. This music was not meant to be written down. It's something that you can use your ears for, and it makes much better learning experience, and then maybe we even honor the music more if we're doing it in the tradition that it was meant to be learned in. So this is the blues progression, and again, I will have written materials with this that'll make it more accessible to see. I'll show you how to play it in a couple different ways, and you can play this at different tempos. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, so this will be our quarter note, but you can certainly play this slower or faster, and maybe slower is probably where you're at if these blues progression things are new to you. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4. You go back to the 1 chord. That was the full 12 bars. Now you can do this a million different ways. You can play this with a shuffle feel. Right? You can do this with jazz chords. All sorts of stuff. But the place to start is just with that thing we talked about with the power chords. So the power chords that you're going to use in the A blues progression, there's an A chord or a 1 chord, there's a D chord or a 4 chord, there's an E chord or a 5 chord. There's just 3 chords. And I would strongly encourage you to not look at the written material that I have, ironically, that I'm giving to you in case you need aid in figuring this out. I would try and hold off on that. Just really try to use your ears to figure that out. It's a skill that I think we are losing as there's more material online, and it's just not as accessible. I think it makes people better musicians to be able to hear this by ear. And a lot of times you'll just retain it more, you'll understand it more, so try to use your ears with this. Another thing that's really powerful and always hard for me to get my students, especially those college students that don't want to be embarrassed, is singing it. If you sing la 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 la, just singing the actual roots of the chords, that's a great way to get it in your ear. And you absolutely can match pitch, and you can sing even if you think you don't. You can't. It's very rare for someone to be actually tone deaf. That's an incredibly rare thing. You can find those notes and sing them, and I think it's a very effective way to practice this stuff. So try and get that blues progression. Just play this till you're sick to your stomach, is what I always say. Play it till you're just so you don't want to play it anymore, and you will really get in your head. And also something else, doing this before you go to bed. Apparently, you really process types of things like this while you sleep, believe it or not. So right before you go to bed, if you can play this a few times, hopefully it crunches around in your brain while you're sleeping. I know that stuff works for me, and it can kind of get you in the groove for the next day when you hopefully practice this again. So then the other thing I'd like to talk about here is I'll have the Eric Clapton tune and the Crossroads things written below that you can link to that we talk about in the syllabus. The other thing I'd like to talk about here is in addition to doing those hammer-ons, there's another exercise I'd like to add now called pull-offs. So hammer-ons were this, right? Just going up the neck. 3 and 4 hammer-ons, right? Now we can add pull-offs. So pull-offs or descending slurs. You put 2 fingers down, so I'll do 1 and 2 here. If I put 2 fingers down, consecutive frets down, and then I pluck, okay? So I play 2 notes, and then I pluck, okay? So I'm ostensibly like I'm plucking the string. I am plucking the string with my left hand. So when you do this, you get this pattern that sounds sort of like this when you're working up the neck. And again, I'm using a pick now. You can use your fingers if you want to. But that's how hammer-ons work. And you can do them any way you want to. You can try, I always say just try to get all your fingers. If you want to try a different rhythm, you can. At first, try to keep them very even, right? Make sure they're very even as you're working up the neck. Make sure it's very, very even and very consistent. You don't want to try and have something that's an unintentional wrong rhythm. All right, so try to keep those going. If you want to add a hammer-on, you can add hammer-ons to pull-offs. That's cool. You can mess around with these now that you have a few things. Walking, hammer-ons, and pull-offs. You get the picking exercises. You can make those into your own little thing. But try to get those going. You'll see as we're coming up here to the week 6 stuff, we're going to talk about the pentatonic scale, and that you can really use hammer-ons and pull-offs in, and it makes for a cool thing to be able to use when you're soloing, and it certainly applies to classical music, certainly applies to pop music. So try those exercises, and that will wrap up what we're talking about for week 5 here. Week 6, we'll be talking about pentatonic scales.